Monday evening. We're waiting on a couple of more members to join us. We've got a number of committee meetings still going on, and we'll convene as quickly as possible. Being here, this is the Senate Ethics Committee. It is a little after 6. We're getting started at a reasonably prompt time. I'm grateful for your presence. I'm going to ask Senator Harbin, would you mind opening us up with prayer?
Okie doke. Thank you, sir. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for the day. We thank you for your goodness to us, and Father, for your graciousness to us. Ask that you would give us wisdom and discernment, dear Lord, as we listen to the issues that are at hand, that, Father, we would represent the people of Georgia, and, Father, we would honor you in all that we do. Would you bless this time in Christ's name? Amen.
Thank you, Senator. We have 3 bills on the agenda for this evening. Some of them, I think, are straightforward. All of them have been heard in one form or another in other committees, either in the Senate or the House, and we'll deal with those as appropriate. There is some language in some of the bills that may be new. But we're going to take some bills out of order just to hopefully move rapidly through a couple. I'm going to start with House Bill 977. This is from Representative LaHood. It's LC 473062S, but this bill is a Senate substitute, and it actually goes back to a Senate Bill 413. I'm going to ask if Senator Robertson was the original author of this bill. I'm going to ask if it's okay with Chairman LaHood that Senator Robertson present the bill. So we're looking at House Bill now 977, LC 473062S. Senator Robertson?
Yes, I'm on
9?
Yes, sir. With your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to present from here, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Now HB 977, LC 473062S is in Sierra. It's a very straightforward and simple piece of legislation that requires that special tax elections, whether it's for a SPLOST or a LOST, they must be held during the time that a normal election is held. What we have seen in the past, in some cases, not to disparage any community, but it seems sometimes there is an effort made to hold some of these elections to approve new taxes at times when they know the voter turnout is going to be low. And so they can be assured of getting these taxes passed. If you read on line 54 through 58, it explains the intent of the legislation in relation to votes on sales and use taxes authorized by Articles 2, 2A, 3, 4, 5, 5A, and 5B of Chapter 8 of Title 48. And also, if you read down on line 67, it is amended by replacing 80 days with 50 days. And what this does is give those communities the narrow time they need to implement these taxes should they pass, so that there's not a break if they're already collecting a SPLOST or a LOST and the citizens decide to renew it, then there's no breakdown in the collection of those special taxes. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Are there any questions from the committee? This is a bill that we heard in committee a few weeks back. It received a favorable report, and it was scheduled through rules to the floor prior to crossover, but did not make that deadline. Are there questions for the author?
Motion to pass.
I have a motion, do pass. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any other discussion? By the way, let me make sure you understand, no one signed up from the public to address this bill. So there was no public input requested. So the motion's in order. I have a second. Any discussion? Those in favor of House Bill now 977 do pass, signify by the uplifted hand. I see 7. Is that right?
Yep.
Madam Leader, you okay? Yes. Thank you. So you passed unanimously. Thank you very much. That was the easy one. Let me see if I can get Chairman LaHood or Representative Fleming to join us, and we'll deal with a bit more challenging opportunities. Whichever one wishes to present first. Okay. Thank you, Representative Fleming. I appreciate Representative Fleming being here. I recognize that this legislation is a combination of several bills and also input from both the Secretary of State's office and the governor's office. I'm grateful for that. But if it's okay, Representative, I'll ask you to present the bill, and then when you run into an area that might be a little foreign, I'll be happy to try to provide some background, if that's okay. Yes, sir. All right, if you would, please, we're working on House Bill 1207, LC 473076S. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see what we have here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate all your help and work on this the past several days, along with Chairman LaHood. This bill is pertaining a lot of different ideas and bills that have been discussed over the past few weeks since session started. So if it's okay, I'll just go through, starting with each section, and then at the end, I'll be happy to talk any questions. So if you go to Section 1, this is pertaining to any person employed or retained by a county election superintendent that deal with election-related duties arising from this chapter. They have to be a citizen of the United States. It just adds that to the section. Section 2 is some cleanup language that the Secretary of State's office had brought to us, actually Section 2 and 3. And it deals with qualifying, when qualifying has been held during qualifying week, and if there's a race, whether nonpartisan or partisan, and nobody had qualified for that particular seat. What this does, it adds that if no one has qualified for that race or that seat, that the following Monday after qualifying has closed at 9 a.m., qualifying will reopen and run through the next day, Tuesday, at 5 p.m. So that is some cleanup language there. Section 4 is what was actually the underlying part of HB 1207, which I presented Thursday in committee, dealing with the ballot proofing process that we discussed Thursday morning in committee. We had a little bit of cleanup there. We did add a date to when this would start, January 1st, 2025. The thought there is we're already in the elections process. Qualifying has happened. We do not want to interrupt the process as it's going on right now, given if this gets passed, not knowing when the governor might sign it, and would just be too close. At that time, ballots would be already printed, machines would already be loaded for early voting and election day. So we put that date, and also some minor cleanup that some of the superintendents sent us as well. Section 5 has to do with voting machines and precincts. Currently what the code says is that for every 250 registered voter in a precinct, there has to be one ballot marking machine. What this does, this has been in the code for a while, what this does, this allows the locals to have control of their machines and their assets, where they need to put them in their counties. This takes into effect, the county election superintendent and their boards will look at how many people voted early, how many people voted absentee, because you might have some precincts in counties where a large chunk of the registered voters had already voted. So it allows them to place their equipment throughout the county, the precincts, as they see needed. Also, this could be a cost-saving measure for the counties as well, as far as transporting the machines and getting ready for their operations on election day. Section 6, which goes over to page 6, deals with poll watchers, and basically the top part, 118 through 127, it outlines what access poll workers have at a location, and basically clears up that they have access to the entirety of whatever location they are observing throughout the day, whether it's early voting or on election day. And then on down that page, line 140, basically talks about designated statewide poll workers that are designated to be statewide. My understanding is this was already it's already an occurrence. It's just cleaning up and clarifying what a statewide poll watcher is able to do. Section 7, this has been in the code for a while. Basically, it prevents violence or violent acts towards election officers, and we just extended it to say elections officials and poll watchers. Basically, anybody who's working the polling places, polling early voting locations or election day locations, basically extends it to them and poll watchers. Like I said, that's been in the code for a while. Mr. Chairman, that's basically the bill that's all rolled up into one. I would like to ask, Mr. Chairman, if you would on Section 6, pertaining to poll watchers, the Secretary of State's office had brought an issue up just a minute ago, and if you would allow, I would like for the Secretary of State's General Counsel to come to talk about that in a minute and possible amendment that, if you would allow, to clarify something.
Thank you. Ms. McGowan, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your expertise.
Sure. Thank you for having us and allowing us to weigh in. With respect to Section 6, we have no objection and support the additional transparency that it provides, but also want to make sure that confidential information of our voters remains protected. So we want to make sure that poll watchers, do not have access to confidential voter information, which is defined elsewhere in the election code in Section 21-225. So the language that we would suggest the committee adopt would be added on line 126, following the sentence ending being observed. Following the end of that sentence, we would suggest that a sentence be added that says, poll watchers shall not be permitted to observe information that is prohibited from disclosure by OCGA 21-2-225B. And again, that's to protect confidential information of voters.
Can we get a get a printout or something that we could perhaps
Sure.
Poll watchers shall not be permitted
To observe information that is prohibited from disclosure by Section 21-2-225B. Correct.
prohibited from disclosure. And give me that site again. Disclosure. Read the rest of that sentence.
In Section 21-2-225B.
Very good.
Are you saying B as in boy or E as in?
B as in boy.
So the intent really is to ensure the confidentiality of elector information. Is that correct?
That is correct. At the polling place, when voters check in, there's going to be on the poll pads the voters' information, such as their date of birth, address, things like that. And so we just want to make sure that poll watchers are not close enough to be able to observe confidential information of voters.
Does the author have an issue with that suggestion? Are you okay?
Yes, sir, we're good. Myself and Chairman LaHood talked about
Okay,
it just for the
fine, thank you.
hearing. We're
And,
fine.
I would just point out that this section came through the Speaker Pro Tem's office, and so we're making really just a clarification of what her language requested. Is that not true?
That is correct, and it's my understanding that her office is amenable to this.
Very good. Thank you very much. I recognize Sir Williams.
Thank you. The poll watchers, do they take an oath? Are
They
the
do,
poll
yes.
watchers bound to take an oath? Is that covered in that oath, that they will not divulge any confidential information that they might observe?
I would defer to our elections director on that. I can get you that particular language.
Yeah.
But I think that
I just wondered if that would be redundant, if they were already taking an oath as a poll watcher or poll workers. I know the poll workers do, but the poll watchers that would be seeing that information, they should be taking an oath as to not being able to duplicate or repeat, or that they are taking an oath.
I think the concern is not that poll watchers would share that information, but they would have access to it in the first place, which is prohibited under the code.
Okay.
It's part of their job. They would not have access to that type of information.
Okay, you know, as poll workers, when they're verifying who is working or who is voting, then they would have access, you know,
The
to
poll
some
workers,
of that.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
the poll workers would, absolutely,
Right.
but we're talking about poll watchers here.
Right, okay. Just wanted to verify. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where is poll watcher defined?
It really is in the bulk of the places in the code that it's addressed is in that particular code section, which is 212408.
And is that where there would be a requirement to take an oath?
Let me refer to that.
And while you're looking for that, my question to either the author, representative, or to council is, how do we define poll watcher? Is it an official poll watcher, as is on line 137, someone who's bearing the sticker, or is it someone who comes off the street and just wants to watch a poll?
Yes, I agree with the representative that it would apply to official poll watchers who are credentialed.
Is it not true that the parties, the political parties credential their poll watchers? Is that not true?
That's correct.
So these are not just casual people walking in saying, I want to watch what's happening. These are individuals who have volunteered. They're volunteers. They're not paid, but they have been trained and authorized by their party to observe the elections process to enhance the public's confidence in the process itself. So they're essential, really, to the elections process, but they are not workers. They are watchers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I've actually been a poll watcher before. I just wanted to make sure. So, should we be specifying who we're talking about to make it more precise, that we're talking about a defined participant in this process? So wherever poll watcher is defined as the person who's selected by the parties, as someone who's allowed to be there, should we be referring to those specifically? Because otherwise, it seems to me that there's some ambiguity here as far as what a poll watcher is.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
defer?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, this particular code section is rather broad and lengthy, and I think that is addressed in other subsections of that same statute.
It's 22-2408, is that correct?
Correct.
408.
Senator Robertson.
Yes. To my friend from the Secretary of State's office, the amendment that y'all are making on where you reference OCGA 21.2.225B, that's primarily the information that's gathered when the individual comes in to submit their driver's license or required ID in order to receive their ballot to vote. Is that correct? Dealing with Social Security numbers and other information that's pertinent to their voter registration?
Right, so this information would be either on the poll pad when the voter checks in, or else it would be on their absentee ballot envelope as well. And to just deal with the specifics of OCGA 21.2.225, which provides for the voter confidentiality, we're talking about information like their date of birth, Social Security number, driver's license numbers, that type of PII that we want to make sure is
So the reasonable request that you have is that poll workers aren't standing behind
poll watchers.
poll watchers aren't standing behind the poll workers who are bringing in that the voters are coming in to to submit and verify that they have a right to vote in that precinct, that they're not standing there looking over their shoulder at a screen, getting all this identifying information that's on the poll pad, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions on this issue? Any other comments on this issue? I want to direct your attention, oh, I'm sorry, Senator Estes, one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologies. I know this is probably from an earlier bill, but the rationale behind judicious, intelligent, and upright citizen of the United States.
I was about to come to that issue.
Okay, thank you.
So, but that was, we've had this discussion for at least the last year and a half or 2 years, and exactly what is judicious, intelligent, and upright. There has been a suggestion, perhaps, that there's no one in the Senate that would qualify. Although you know, we might have a difference of opinion.
Maybe here.
Okay. I've had a request that those 3 words be excluded from this, and that it would then read, "An election-related duties arising from this chapter shall be a citizen of the United States." How would you feel about that, Senator?
Well, I guess my question would be the rationale behind that. I know green card holders and others who are, you know, involved in the democratic process one way or the other, looking to be citizens. Just curious about what the rationale.
A green card holder would not be an eligible voter, would they?
Agreed.
Okay, so
Agreed.
they're not an elector.
Agreed.
Okay, so I believe the intent, and this comes from a Senate Bill 229 by Senator Beach last year, and that language was also included in Senate Bill 221, which passed out of this committee twice. And it did include the judicious, intelligent, upright, but it did require that election workers be citizens of the United States.
So, Mr. Chairman, just a comment there. We allow those who are under the age of 18 who cannot yet vote to participate in anticipation of them becoming of age and being able to participate. If you extend that logic to those who are becoming citizens, then why would we exclude them from being able to participate in the same way that you have teenagers who will soon be able to vote participate as well?
I appreciate your input. Senator Harvin?
Yes, sir. Just curious, in that we have them as a citizen, but would there be the need to define as they are not being do not have criminal charges or are not serving parole? Any of those things would be there, or just a citizen? Could someone with a criminal background or under criminal indictment? Is there anything there? Just curious in the current code that addresses that.
I'm not aware of whether the current code addresses that or not. Senator Robertson, can you comment?
I just want to be clear, convicted felon can vote in Georgia if they have fulfilled their sentence and responsibilities. So criminal history should not matter if they have fulfilled the obligations of the court. So yeah, I think we're okay there.
Any other discussion from the committee before we accept public input?
Chairman, you were talking about amendments, and I just want to be clear on line 33, and I'm sure Ledge Council can help me. That "and" at the end there, at the end of section 2,
Yeah, section
Right.
2,
am I just
subparagraph 3.1.
There's another paragraph that comes after that,
okay?
So,
And-
there you go.
And
which is why you're needing the "and" on line 26. So it's a series of paragraphs, so that is appropriate to have there.
very good.
Yeah.
Thank you as always,
Thank
Stuart, for correcting me.
Any further comments from the committee? Thank you very much. We have several people who would like to speak to this bill. I'd like to accept public input on House Bill 1207. 1207. Ms. Battles, if you would, please keep your comments to 2 minutes. We have about 10 or so folks who would like to address the bill.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. My name is Cindy Battles, and I am the Policy Director for the People's Agenda. I actually think the new version has cleared up some of my issues, or I'm just unable to find them at this point. I will point out when at line 21, when you're talking about the citizen of the United States, I understand that green card holders can't vote, but they are legally allowed to work in the United States. There is Sugarman v. Dougal, who would that would potentially give them the right to do so. And in an environment where counties are having such a difficult time finding poll workers, I would caution prohibiting people who are here legally and who need jobs from, borrowing them from that employment. Sorry, I was making notes as I was sitting here. I know that this is existing statute, but because we are expanding this to to all primary elections and runoffs, I want to point out this other relevant factors on line 103. I have a lot of concern about that. I can be okay with subtracting the number of folks who have voted early or absentee, but I do think we need to think about what's causing lines during early voting, and what could cause those lines during Election Day. And I've already said something about the 2018 election and not having enough of that kind of. I've spoken to that several times. It's good to hear the Secretary of State give input onto this section around 124. I think this is going to cause a lot of problems in some counties. I think it should be better defined about where those areas are, because as close as is practical to the observed activity and that sort of thing. We had similar language to this in 202 that was stricken down.
Thank you for your input.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you being here and your involvement. Thank you.
Oh, y'all, I talked as fast as I could.
I know you did. Ms. Cruz, Victoria Cruz. By the way, some of you oppose Section 6. Section 6 in the original form is no longer there. Ms. Cruz?
Victoria Cruz from Maconia County, and I want to thank you for revising that language that was quite vague and unnecessary in the bill. Thank you very much. What I do want to comment on is the judicious, intelligent, and upstanding. I believe that should be kept. To me, it is just a requirement. Elections, as they are administered today, are so complicated with all the paperwork and all the rules and regulations and the electronics. We need intelligent people. That is the biggest problem, and why a lot of open election worker positions can't be filled, because they don't have the technological information, knowledge to take that position. So I would like that to be put back in, if only for the technical part, and to be sure that the people are being screened. I do believe that in addition to poll workers being a citizen of the United States, I believe they should be citizens of Georgia, at least. If they are not a citizen of Georgia or citizen of the county they're working in, they're not a stakeholder. They are not a stakeholder. They have no skin in the game. It's just something I think needs to be there. We do not want our counties importing people from Wisconsin, Michigan, New York, California, Oregon, Washington, and you can bet your bottom dollar this year they will be lining up to volunteer. I think it should be Georgia. And the poll pad observation, I am a poll watcher now for 3 years. I train every year. I've been trained by more than 2 parties, and the training has improved immensely. I know more about elections now than I ever did. And
Thank you for your input.
we need to see when
Thank you
people are
for
coming in that they're giving the right kind of ID.
Thank you
Not
for
the
your-
ID,
thank
but
you
the
for your
right
input.
kind. Thank you.
Mr. Muldowney? Kevin Muldowney? Please maintain a direct focus on the bill and stay under a 3-minute limit, please.
2 minutes, right?
2.
2, yeah. Good
thank
evening.
you.
Good evening. I was really coming down to speak on the intimidation, which I'm very glad was taken out of there. I still feel, in this environmental lawfare where people are hassled and have to put up money to hire lawyers and defend themselves, Section 7, 1 through 4, is a little vague to the extent that somebody could, everybody's got a camera these days. If somebody's standing in a door, somebody snaps a picture of it, says, hey, I couldn't get through, let's, accuse this guy of a felony. We got to be careful with, when you're talking of a felony and a fine of up to $100,000, the
believe
wording
if-
has to be as
If you look at that
clear as we
carefully,
can.
this is, I don't see whether that would qualify. Duties or materially interrupts or improperly or materially interferes with the execution.
Willfully
This is
blocks or
already in
attempts.
code. You do
Yeah,
understand?
I know. Yeah, but looking at it just kind of looks. The more precise we can make it, and the less fudge factor the more fudge factor we can take out of there, the better off we're all going to be. And I would also second Victoria Cruz's mention of Georgia citizens working in our election, because they're the ones that really would have a stake in stake in the game. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your input. Ms. Lasting. Ms. Lasting?
Good evening. It's Lastinger.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, you're
Lastinger.
fine.
I didn't see the I-N-G-E-R.
You're
There you
fine.
go.
Scribble
Ms. Rachel Lastinger. Thank you.
So yeah, my name is Rachel Lastinger, and I'm the Associate Director of the Voter Access Project with the ACLU of Georgia. I'm here to speak in opposition of this bill today, specifically Section 1 and Section 4, which thank you, Senator, for your great questions on Section 1 earlier. But Section 1 creates an unnecessary and discriminatory requirement of citizenship to work the polls or any other position in our election system. Although not allowed to vote, non-citizens are an integral part of our communities and should be allowed to work in whatever position they have been selected for through the normal processes. Adding this requirement does nothing but create classes of people with no purpose behind the law, and in a time where counties across the state desperately need poll workers. We should be encouraging more people to serve their communities through needed election roles rather than disallowing entire groups of people based on their citizenship status. In Section 4, beginning at line 86, the bill allows for election superintendents to reduce or increase the number of polling booths from the standard 1 for each 250 electors based on expectations for lower turnout. This rule is already being well implemented by most county election superintendents, but if there is going to be an option to reduce the number of polling booths available to voters, which potentially leads to longer lines and wait times, then we'd like to have some safeguards in place. There should be language in this bill that safeguards from miscalculation or wrong assumptions that lead to a reduction of polling booths leading to longer lines. At the very least, if this bill passes and polling booths are reduced at a polling location, then we should see, and we see lines that are longer than 30 minutes, there should be language in this bill that ensures the number of polling booths is automatically required to be brought back up at this polling location and are not reduced again in the coming elections that cycle. There are currently no safeguards in place in this bill's language to ensure that we do not see an over-reduction in polling booths. But overall, we just are not in support of the
Thank
bill.
you.
So
Thank you for your input. We appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
Hi, my name is Michael Gordon, and I live in Roswell. I have 3 comments on the bill. I think it's a great bill. If it has these changes, I think it'll be a really good bill. The first is on Section 1. I agree with the other folks that we should have Georgia citizens. I think it's completely unnecessary to have people from other states. But if there's an issue with that as far as poll workers and that sort of thing, why not start with having a preference for Georgia citizens, and only if you can't get Georgia citizens, then you could reach into the larger community. So, I think that would handle any issue regarding limiting it to citizens. So that's the first one. The second observation is on Section 4, which has to do with notifying candidates, give them a chance to look over the ballot. I think that's a great idea. But from a practical point of view, you get 24 hours and you get an email. I know about you guys, but hundreds of emails a day. Sometimes I miss them, so it could easily happen. So how about a text notification that you have an email? Add that so that you don't miss it. If the idea is to give them a chance to review it, how about make sure they don't miss it? So that's a minor thing there, but I think it's a great idea to do that. And finally, number 7, or section 7. I know that this is mostly existing code. And I understand. I heard that argument a lot. But I personally think it's really already bad code. And, sometimes you don't see bad code until you see it in a bill. And what's bad about it is the first 4 items, the first 4 paragraphs on there are very vague and confusing, like something like preventing people from doing their job. Like, okay, that could mean anything. Or blocking a door. And now you get up to 10 years in jail and $100,000 just because you blocked a door. Why not just have the police escort them out? Why don't we remove the first 4 items from that so it's not a felony and leave the last 4, which are actually serious crimes, like ballot box stuffing, things like that. I'm all for protecting our elections. So even though it's existing code, let's just strike it, and then it'll be a really good bill.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Grateful. Ms. Lee. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, good evening, Chairman Burns. My name is Jennifer Lee, and I'm the Policy Director at Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, and I'd also like to focus my comments on New Code Section 1. My first concern is that the language in the bill is broad and could capture a wide range of existing positions that don't currently require U.S. citizenship. For example, it's unclear if this would include not just poll workers, but a security guard who's working at a polling place, building maintenance staff, an administrative assistant in a county, communications staff, et cetera. And second is this is a new employment requirement. My question is, how would this be implemented for existing positions where non-citizens may already be currently employed? So if we're enforcing it retroactively and we're asking everyone to show proof of U.S. citizenship, if someone is not a U.S. citizen, will they lose their job that they have been faithfully performing up until then? And for context for my comments, about 1 in 4 Asians living in Georgia are not currently U.S. citizens. The road to citizenship can be very long for many individuals who live, work, and raise their families and do have skin in the game and stakes in Georgia. More than 370,000 non-citizens of all national origins do currently work in the state of Georgia in a wide range of industries, and although they do not vote, they do work. We trust non-citizens to take care of our children, of our elders. We trust them in our healthcare industry. We trust them in our military. And this provision would limit equal employment opportunities for those non-citizens. So I feel it's an unnecessary barrier. And so we ask that you strike that from this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Ms. Bearden. Breeden, I'm sorry. Forgive me, Heather. I can't read. One of my challenges.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Heather Breeden, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Engagement for Georgia First. We have significant concerns about the language in the most recent substitute for HB 1207. Our most significant concerns relate to Section 6. While we support the Secretary of State's proposed amendment related to a voter's expectation of privacy, we are still concerned about the language in this section. While the intention behind allowing poll watchers closer access to the election process may be to enhance transparency and accountability, there are several potential issues with this proposal that you should consider. Transparency is crucial in the electoral process, but overly close scrutiny by poll watchers could potentially intimidate poll workers and elected officials tasked with the delicate task of counting and tabulating votes. These individuals must be able to carry out their duties without anxiety and fear of interference or intimidation from observers. We are also concerned that this language could create a legitimate threat in maintaining an appropriate chain of custody and the integrity of ballots. Allowing poll watchers such close access could potentially compromise the security and confidentiality of ballots, raising the questions about reliability of the election process. We acknowledge and share a desire for transparency and accountability in the electoral process and support allowing poll watchers reasonable access to observe the counting and tabulation of votes. I think we all in this room share that desire and acknowledge reasonable access can help reassure the public that the process is fair and free from irregularities. This language, however, provides too little guidance and will create unintended consequences and potential chaos where it is actually meant to strengthen transparency. We urge the committee to reconsider this language, providing for guidance related to the number of poll watchers permitted per observation of individual election and poll workers and reasonable options counties can employ to achieve the desired results.
Thank you. Appreciate your input. Mr. McKinnon. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm Joey McKinnon with Georgia Values Action. We work on behalf of Georgia working families across the state. We take a real narrow focus in regard to election bills like this one, simply to make sure that voting is accessible so that working families are better represented. And what we have in our kitchen table conversation is they want elections to be safe and accessible. We appreciate elements of this bill that do these things. However, concerns over elements in Section 5 and Section 6, we oppose this bill. Regarding Section 5, the option to reduce the number of voting machines at polling locations is something we oppose because it could mean longer wait times and decreased accessibility for working parents. They often say, long lines are a cause to just leave the line or turn away. And, we just don't want that to happen. Regarding Section 6, we appreciate the change made today, but like the last speaker, oppose it for similar reasons in the substitute language, just because it appears in the time I've had to absorb, it could lead to intimidation. Election laws not only lay out procedure, they send a message. The way I read this is the message seems to convey a cloud of suspicion could be made over our hardworking and honest election officials. So I encourage you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Alshire? I may have mispronounced your name. I apologize.
My name is Stephen Elshire from Oconee, Watkinsville.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. I'm a volunteer, unpaid citizen poll watcher. I'm not a paid governmental poll worker. So as it was originally in the modified bill, this would have been a horrible situation. But now, given the comments that have passed in the last several minutes, I feel that I should emphasize, as others have, that all participants, including the electors as well as the workers, poll workers, should be citizens of the U.S. The Georgia thing, that's argumentative, but the U.S. at a minimum. One final thing, I don't know that the participants or the senators are aware. All poll watchers are trained and they have to be certified. And we're taught that you must ask the poll manager or the supervisor on duty of any kind of question that you might have. This is a regulatory requirement and we must undergo training. These exchanges typically are in a low, quiet voice, so they could be distorted in retrospect to say, well, that was an intimidating remark you made. Throw them in the brig. So that's all I'll say about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your input. That concludes all of our public input. Now, I'm happy to entertain questions or comments. I'm sorry. You're not on the sign sheet.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Only because it's you, Ms. Rubenstein.
Thank you very much. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Marcy Rubenstein. I represent the Georgia Association of Voting Registrars and Elected Officials, and we do appreciate all the work that's gone into this bill. We think it's very important to have a second set of eyes on the ballots, so we appreciate the ballot proofing, and we think that that whole process will work very seamlessly when the process begins. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now it's time for the committee. Any more discussion or comments from the committee, or any questions for the author? Mr. Estevos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to highlight a couple things. One, the safeguards, the need for safeguards in Section 5, I think was a good point that we just heard. This section does allow and give a lot of flexibility to the locals, which I think is needed to some degree. But at the end of the day, this provision was intended to set a floor and make a statement on that, what that floor should be. And if we're allowing these folks flexibility, we should at least provide some safeguards to ensure that voters don't have to wait anywhere in Georgia, have to wait longer than anyone else in another part of the state. And then two, in some ways, the vagueness around Section 7 and who it relates to can, to some degree, interfere with Section 6, especially as it relates to the second provision there, where if Section 6 allows a supervisor an official to remove a poll watcher, could there potentially set up a conflict with that same section in Section 2, where one's accusing the other of committing a felony? And we can see where that goes from there. And we heard a few commenters talk about that very issue. I just want to raise those two issues, Mr. Chairman.
May I have a follow-up question for you?
Yeah.
On line 149, it clarifies the fact that the use of violence or the threats of violence. So we're talking about a very aggressive individual here.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the threat of violence in particular is vague. What does that look like to some folks? My friend from the 29th is looking at me right now. Is that a threat?
My wife looks at me that way sometimes.
I
look like this all
yeah, exactly. But that's I can see how if you have a situation where an official is trying to remove a poll watcher, and there's a verbal altercation, there are looks. There are all kinds of things that can happen there, and I think using violence is pretty specific. Threatening violence, I'm not sure what that looks like.
All right, I'll turn to Senator Harbin.
Yes, sir. In looking at lines 20 and 21 on the qualifications for a county election supervisor,
yes,
we said that they're to be judicious, intelligent, upright citizen of the U.S. My question is, how is that proven, or is there a standard for what's done there? I know that as a part of the identification for voters, we use the driver's license, the Georgia driver's license, or a state-issued ID card, which is provided free of charge, as I understand it. There would be some way to identify this person. I guess, how do we identify them? First, as a citizen of the U.S. Secondly, do we identify them as a citizen of Georgia? And we do that for the voter. Should we not do that with the county election superintendent? Just asking that question.
Thank you. I would suggest that part of the concern that some have expressed over the terms judicious, intelligent, and upright is the fact that it's difficult for us to effectively determine who that might be. I would say that you can verify your citizenship by your voter ID card, and that would also indicate that if you're a voter in Georgia, you would, and are you a citizen, that would be sufficient.
So that same requirement would be for the county election superintendent. That would be part of either his judicial, intelligent, or upright citizen, is that he would prove that with some type of ID, being a Georgia license or otherwise.
The election superintendent is the election official, and they would be an elector in the community, which, generally speaking, the elector in the community where they are conducting the elections.
Okay.
Senator Robertson.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the concerns in Section 5, dealing with the reduction of equipment and things of that nature, I think one thing we have to keep in mind is it does reference Code Section 21-2-263, which, if you read that, gives very clear guidance to the election superintendent. And I think the expert when it comes to that on this committee is, of course, Chairman Williams, who has carried out this job longer than anybody that I know in the House or the Senate. And that there is a science used by our election supervisors, superintendents, when they start looking at machines during certain elections, knowing how many they need to put out and how many they don't. I have precincts in Muskogee County and Columbus that, based on the elections, they pull a full breadth of equipment out, and then based on some lesser, smaller elections, they determine not to. And I think we saw that SB 202 has done great, has made great advances in reducing waiting times in lines. So I'm not so concerned with that. And then if we get over to Section 7, I think it's really clear. Willfully is a legal term that is defined, that is easily articulated in court. Uses or threatens violence. We have charges in the state of Georgia that an individual can be charged with assault without ever touching someone, based on how close they get to someone, based on volume, based on threatening mannerisms. Willfully blocks, uses or threatens violence. I think all of this is very clear. And while I understand both sides seem to have some concerns with it, in the areas where I'm elected, the responsibility of policing, if you will, the polling places rests with the county sheriff. They deliver the equipment. They assist the election superintendents in bringing everything from storage to the precincts. And they also assign deputies at the polls that are the busiest, and then they have roving deputies that move from precinct to precinct based on any complaints or everything. So I don't see any of this language as obstructive in preventing anyone from coming in and voting, while at the same time, I think it sends a strong message to anybody who might want to come to a precinct and threaten or intimidate any voter from any party from coming out there and voting. So I think this is a good piece of legislation, and at the right time, Mr. Chair, once amendments are made.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Robertson. Well, I think the Section 21-2-263 on the number of booths is sufficient. I think what counties need is more poll pads getting the voters in. This is where they are backed up waiting to get checked in to get their card. And even as I've gone and voted and I've gotten my card or waiting to get my card, there's empty machines. So I think that point brought up, and conferring with other election officials, even with text during this hearing, that if we can alleviate that and require counties, if there is a line that is not moving, then they should have to have more poll pads available at those precincts to get people on in. That's where the holdup is. Thank you. It's just a point of.
And to comment on your observation, I know that the Secretary of State's office is working on enhancing the check-in process and the verification process as we move forward. We've had an opportunity to go through this bill in quite some detail, and we've had a number of comments. We appreciate the public input. It is now time to entertain a motion. Senator Robertson?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Senator Robertson and a second from Senator Williams. Now, I'll entertain any amendments to the underlying bill. I'd entertain an amendment to accommodate the Secretary of State's request to include in language, in line 126, after the word observed, to include a sentence that says, poll watchers shall not be permitted to observe information that is prohibited from disclosure in section 21-2-25B. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes.
I need someone to, from the committee, have a motion from the committee. I have a comment, sir. First, Senator Estevez. I have a motion. I need a second for the amendment.
That was a second.
Second, thank you. Got a second for the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? We're good? Seeing none? All right, and I'd like to entertain a motion on a second amendment. I'd like to entertain a motion to amend line 20. Line 20 to strike the words judicious, intelligent, and upright, as much as it pains me to do that.
As much as I think we are all three of those things, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second for amendment number 2. Is there, Senator Estevez, you speak to amendment 2?
Mr. Chairman, I've actually had one other suggestion, but
All right.
I've already spoken to lines 20 and 21.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Are there any other amendments?
Mr. Chairman, if it's not out of order, I'd love to, I'm interested in hearing what Senator Estes has to say.
Sorry.
I think it's important.
Well, I was going to. There's an amendment on another section, but I think that a reasonable suggestion would be to remove judicious, intelligent, and upright citizen of the United States and replace it with shall be a resident of Georgia. I think that would take care of the concerns of ensuring that they are residents, and at the same time not leave out those folks who are green card holders and can actually work in Georgia legally.
Would that, for clarification, Senator, would that mean you would want to remove the citizen of the United States and add, or just replace it with a citizen of Georgia or resident of Georgia?
I would remove citizen of the United States.
You've satisfied me, Mr. Chair. I heard what he had to
That's
say.
right, thank you. All
I
right,
appreciate
Senator
it.
Williams?
Just for a point of reference, Troup County, Georgia's supervisor of elections lives in Alabama. So when you get to these border counties, they don't always are not able to live in the county. So that would be an issue. And I felt that too at first, but then hearing from some of our elections peoples are in the counties and
I
probably
represent Troup County.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I do.
Okay.
I would also say, I appreciate Vice Chairman pointed that out. We have a number of election officials and election superintendents that may reside in an adjacent county. So they wouldn't necessarily reside in the county where they're conducting the elections. And as you point out, they may actually be residents of a different state, but they're still employed election officials and election workers in Georgia, but they're residents of the United States. Is that not true?
That's true.
Any further comments?
I think that last amendment is there.
All right. We have an amendment.
Amendment
We have-
line 20,
Yep.
seconded by
I'll
Chairman.
Seconded by Senator Williams. All right. We're going to take up the amendments in order, actually in inverse order. We're going to take up amendment number 2 first. Senator Estevez, you have a comment?
I was just going to suggest one more amendment,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Section 7, adding the word credentialed in front of poll watcher in line 150 and 153.
So you would add the word credentialed poll watcher?
Yes, just to make sure that they are
I hear you.
properly trained and not initially trying to come in.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Yes.
that'd be-
Is there a second? I have a second. So this is Amendment 3. We're down to 3 amendments, and I was hoping we'd have none. But Amendment 3 is on line 150 inserting the word credentialed before poll watcher.
Do we
And-
need to define credentials? Legal counsel?
Should we define credentialed? Is there a way to handle that, Mr. Morelli?
I'd suggest we cross-reference back to 212408.
So cross-reference to 212408 would define a credentialed poll watcher?
212408 is the code section that deals with poll watchers.
Okay.
So, poll watcher.
Is already defined as, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so to make sure that we capture the proper people on lines 120 or 151 and 153, it would be poll watchers as provided by code section 212408.
Okay. So poll watchers as defined by 212408, is that correct?
21-240-8.
No. 21-2-408.
Yes, sir.
So now we're looking at amendment to line 150. And it would say, or poll watcher credentialed by, give that to us, please, Mr. Morelli.
After poll watcher,
Right.
on lines 151 and 153, I'd suggest saying, so read poll watchers as provided for in OCGA or code section 21-2-408.
Code section 21-4-408.
21-2.
Dash 2, yes, 21-2-408.
Mr. Estevez, Senator Estevez, is that acceptable? Is it an acceptable
That's fine.
definition? Is that okay? And Mr. Robertson, your second's okay?
My second's still saying.
Very good. Okay, so we have, we now have 3 amendments to House Bill 1207. And I will take up the amendments in reverse order. First of all, we'll take up amendment number 3, adding the wording to lines 150 and 153 after poll watcher to as, quote, as provided for by the code section 21-2-408. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of amendment number 3 indicate with the uplifted hand. I see plenty, 7 yeas, no nays. Okay, so amendment 3 is adopted. We're now going to move to amendment number 2. Amendment number 2 was moved, give me the, who moved that? Amendment number 2. All right, so Senator Robertson moved and Senator Williams seconded amendment number 2, which is to strike the words judicious, intelligent, and upright from line 20. Any discussion? What's the will of the committee? Those in favor of amendment number 2 indicate with the uplifted hand. I see 4 yeas. Reverse, opposed? 3 noes. So that amendment is adopted. Finally, we go back to amendment number 1. Amendment number 1 is section 6, line 126. Senator Williams moved and Senator Estevez seconded a motion to insert after the word observed the language, poll watchers shall not be permitted to observe information that is prohibited from disclosure in section 21-2-25B. Are there any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of amendment number 1 indicate with the uplifted hand. Thank you very much. All those opposed? I see 7-0. And then finally, we're at the underlying bill. Representative Fleming? We didn't do it too bad, did we? We didn't mess it up too bad. All right. Those in favor of any further discussion on House Bill 1207? All those in favor of House Bill 1207 do pass. By substitute, indicate with the uplifted hand. I see four yeas. Those opposed? I see 3 nays. Motion carries. House Bill 1207 is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Congratulations. Well, moving right along. 974, House Bill 974. I would entertain a brief break if that's a desire of the committee. Let's take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and deal with. I know it's late, but we need to get these bills along as much as we can. 974, 10 minutes. Now going to consider House Bill 974, LC 473066S. Is that correct?
You would let me put it in? Oh, right here. Okay.
Chairman LaHood, share with us your bill.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for letting me be here and present House Bill 974, which is a combination of 3 bills that crossed over from the House. It includes the original 974, 976, and 977. So Section 1 and 2 requires a visible security feature to be present on the ballots. We currently use security paper, but it's not detected by the human eye. And so this requires at least one security feature that can be seen, and that's what that does. We've already appropriated it in the amended budget, and the Secretary of State's office is in motion on that provision.
Good.
Section 3 deals with digital images of mail-in absentee ballots, and Section 4 deals with digital images of paper ballots created by the voting system, and it requires that they be posted on public website for voters to examine as they wish. We did add a 5 p.m. by the second Friday following the day of the election deadline for those to be posted. I'd prefer them to be posted as soon as possible, but this is the absolute, that's the deadline. Section 5 deals with expanded audits of elections. And what this does is require that the top of ballot race be audited with a risk limiting audit, and one other statewide race. and that other statewide race will be determined by the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker, and minority leader from each chamber. Let me skip back up to line 71 through 75. Currently, the probability of statistical outcome in state election board rule is 10%. And I understand the Secretary's office uses a lower threshold now, but in rule is 10%. This would lower that to 8% starting this year. It would go down to 6% in 2026, and then starting in 2028, 5% or less. All right. 79, line 79 and down talks about the state that lists the statewide races that are eligible to be selected by that 5-person panel I talked about. Let's see. Line 120 explains that nothing in this code section shall prevent an election superintendent from conducting tabulation or risk-limiting audits in additional contests if circumstances warrant the auditing of one or more additional contests than those required by this code section. In section 6 is a new section, and it requires the Secretary of State to create a pilot program for auditing paper ballots using optical character recognition. So reading the actual text that the human eye can read as opposed to the QR code. And this is just a verification audit pilot program that we'd like to be in place by this November for the general election. That is a summary of the bill. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Questions from the committee for the chairman and the author of the bill? Well, you must have done a great job, Mr. Chairman, because everybody is too tired to ask questions right now.
I make a motion to pass.
Not yet. I hear you.
It has been a thoroughly vetted bill.
It has.
A lot of stakeholders have given input, and I appreciate that.
Every section of this bill was heard in committee last week. Is that not true?
That is correct.
It was heard as House Bill 974, 976, and 977. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Very good. So this is not the first time you've seen this bill. The only area that is new, if I'm correct, is Section 6. Is that right?
That is correct.
That's the pilot program to verify the ballots cast in November, but using character recognition technology. Is
That's
that correct? Okay. Senator?
Yeah, real quick, was there a fiscal cost on the pilot program that was worked out with the Secretary of State's office?
There is a cost, and it's been tossed around in appropriations, and discussions have been happening. And so Chairman Burns and I have been involved in those discussions with the Secretary of State, and the cost is around $5 million.
Okay, very good, thank you.
We have discussed that. We're still negotiating how best to support this project, but that is our desire. Any further questions from the committee? I would point out, which I'm very grateful for, lines 120 through 122 codifies the fact that our local election officials can provide any number of audits that they choose as they so choose. Is that not true, Mr. Chairman?
That is true.
So doesn't limit them in any way to either doing a full tabulation or a risk-limiting audit. Is that right?
That is correct.
So that's very helpful. Any further questions from the committee? Hearing none, we do have, oops, I'm sorry, Senator Harbin?
Page 4 on line 88, it strikes the word tabulation out on that, and I was just wondering, is there a reason behind the tabulation, or what I think of the word is tabulation? Why is that stricken from that line? Shall conduct for certification, tabulation, or risk limiting audit. Are they two separate things? I was just wondering why that tabulation was being struck.
So a risk limiting audit has a threshold of statistical probability, and we're lowering that threshold here down to 5% or less over the next few years. And when I spoke with the Secretary of State's election office about this, they agreed that tabulation was not necessary here. It's my understanding that a tabulation audit would be more like a recount, and there's other triggers that would happen, for a recount to happen.
Could you define for me between a tabulation and a risk limiting audit? What is the differential between the two?
I may need the Secretary of State's counsel up here to help me with that. We've talked about it extensively, but I'd like them to come explain.
Happy to recognize Mr. Evans, Blake Evans, Secretary of State's office, who is our state elections director.
Thank you. So the tabulation audit in this context is essentially it's what some states do, where they just say we're gonna audit 2% of our precincts or 5% of our precincts, and the issue with that is if you have a very close margin, that might not tell you much. The good thing about a risk limiting audit is because of the threshold that we're lowering, or that's being proposed to be lowered in this bill, is it scales. So if you have a very close margin, you might end up auditing 20% of your precinct. So the risk limiting audit is really a better, stronger audit. And so it's taking out the tabulation portion here and just leaving in the risk limiting.
I was just wondering because it uses the word or, so it's that it's an either or issue from that standpoint. And I was just curious why that was struck in place of that. And it seems like you got an option you're not being able to play by striking it, where with it unstruck, you're able to do either one from that standpoint. It just seems like there's a limitation there. But I was curious why that was being struck.
Is it not true that the risk limiting audit is a more intense review of the balloting process?
That is correct.
And isn't it also true that on lines 120 to 22, it doesn't prohibit a jurisdiction from doing a tabulation if they so choose?
Correct.
Thank you. Senator Estes?
Senator Butler.
Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Butler.
Senator Robertson alluded to the fact that we need, or there should have been some fiscal note or some amount that it might cost for the Secretary of State's office to do this. And I mean, how can this be implemented before there's funds to implement the program, the pilot program?
So I'll answer your question. My intent is for this to be implemented by November, but there's no date here. I've been talking to the Secretary of State's office, and they are talking with the vendor with the technology to do this, and there's ongoing discussions about the details of exactly how they will administer that program and what will be involved. And so we needed more time to talk about the details, and that's why there's no hard date here. But the intent is this would be in place by November.
This is a statement, I believe, if I'm not correct, Mr. Chairman, that this is what we would like to see provided, because we believe it can add a great deal of value to our state and to election, the elections process, and certainly the confidence in it. We hope to get there, Madam Leader. This is a step in the right direction.
Well, we can't find out without money, can we?
We are working on that piece of that equation for sure. We have 5 people signed up to speak to House Bill 974. Let's hear input from our colleagues in the public. Ms. Battles? We're back to the 2-minute drill.
I'm not even going to need that one.
Oh, good. That's best.
Again, Cindy Battles, People's Agenda. Thank you, committee. I think that again, we're neutral on the bill. I think that some of the margins discussed, they're kind of, they end up being something that would not change the results of an election. I understand kind of what the purpose behind that is, but I do just kind of want to bang my usual drum of, if we are going to continue making it harder for election supervisors to do their jobs, we really, really got to give them money. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your input. Mr. Tripp, good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Burns and other senators on the committee. My name is Vic Tripp. I'm a resident of DeKalb County, and I like this bill. I have, in particular, I like Section 1. I'd like to speak to Sections 4 and 5. Section 4, regarding posting images of the ballots, I think is a good one. I think it's a great idea. And in particular, if there are images that are original, that are taken at which images are actually used to do the tabulation. But I have an idea for improvement, and that is that you publish the SHA files along with these files. Those are the security files that are generated at the same time as the images are generated. Otherwise, they can be tampered with, and we've found cases where they have been tampered with. So if you publish the SHA files from the original scan, then I think you've taken big steps toward election confidence by the voters. Another possibility is, and this is maybe in other legislation, but to unseal the paper ballots so that they can be requested as public records, and then anybody can audit them. And there'll be independent audits. An audit that's internal is not going to move the needle very much on confidence. An independent audit is what is the standard. I also support the idea of audits, which of course I do. And even the risk limiting audits may be of value, but I would like to see the code or the bill specify independent audits. If the same outfit that did the original count is doing the audit,
Thank you.
then
Thank you for
mistakes
your
that they make in one case will be made in the other.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Tripp. Mr. Gordon.
Once again, Michael Gordon from Roswell. This could be a good bill, but right now it's not, and I would seriously like you guys to consider some things to make some changes before you rush to pass this bill. A couple things. In Section 4, ballot images, a minor thing, it's 200 DPI. I think we should raise that to 600 DPI. 200 is just way too low.
We've had conversations about that before, and our problem is the technology currently doesn't support it, and we're working toward it.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. The other thing is also, because images can be easily altered, and my understanding is that you guys actually have evidence that this has happened in Fulton County. We need language to make sure that all the physical ballots are available for supervised inspection by residents in their own county at no cost. Just showing us images that have been altered doesn't do any good, and it will not restore voter confidence. So, and then in Section 5, we got to keep the word tabulation. I don't agree at all with what the Secretary of State does. RLAs are not better than actually counting the ballots. There's nothing better than counting the ballots. Taking that out is huge, and I think that's totally wrong. We can't do that. We should change the language to, for selecting the contest to audit, we should do it randomly, not by choice by elected officials. And in Section 6, we should completely remove this, because replacing QR code readers with text readers does absolutely nothing to increase voter confidence. Nothing. So text readers, whether for audits or for tabulation during an election, are just as bad as a QR code reader. It's a machine making decisions. We have no visibility. The people want hand-counted paper ballots in the precinct on Election Day. Nothing less will restore confidence in our election process. Please take these seriously. It's very important that we have confidence in our elections, and technology solutions without hand-counted validation won't cut it. So please fix this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Ms. Cruz. No, thank you. You signed up, and I'd ask you to make your comments. No, thank you. Ms. Cruz?
All right, I'm sorry. He's a much better spokesman for me than me for this. This bill, I know we've talked about it a lot, and I appreciate Representative LaHood bringing it. I do agree with a lot that's in here. I like the security ballot features very much. I do take reservation with the 600 dots per inch or the highest resolution possible within the certified system. That's in Section 3. I understand that was a concession made to the Secretary of State's office because they don't believe the technology is there. But I just want to point out, when the machine says 600, it's going to be less than 600. And when the machine says 200, the actual image is going to look a lot less. So I think we have to try to get that up as much as possible. The other thing I want to talk about is risk limiting audits. Dr. Philip Stark, the one who actually invented this risk limiting audit, he invented it in California, where they do all hand-marked paper ballots, all fill in the bubble ballots. That way, it was designed to verify to have a voter verifiable result. I mean, the voter could look at the ballot and say, yep, that's what I did. Yep, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put that in the scanner. When you do a BMD, they don't have that. They don't have that list of candidates. They don't have evidence of what button they actually pushed. And it's, regardless of what anybody said, people are not looking at their ballots. They're not looking at their ballots to make sure that and this is what Philip Stark has now said, the way that risk limiting audits are being used in states with BMDs, ballot mark device ballots, it just doesn't work. It's worthless, and he has actually disavowed himself from the company that does the risk limiting audits.
Thank you for your input. I'm grateful. Out of deference to Mr. Favorito, I'll recognize Mr. Favorito for 2 minutes. No applause necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got stuck in Atlanta traffic, so
that happens.
It was unbelievable. I just wanted to mention Senator Harbin's suggestion here. We originally had said that we don't want to prevent the counties from using a certain kind of audit. And this, with the striking of tabulation or risk limiting audits in line 88, that prevents the counties from conducting any type of audit that they feel is the most appropriate for the situation. I testified last time why a risk limiting audit is not appropriate in all cases, because it's a very cumbersome process. Sometimes it's just easier to hand count the ballots, and the counties have done that. So what I would just simply ask to do is to strike the words, as Senator Harbin has said, tabulation or in line 88, and then it doesn't, the counties can conduct the type of audit that they can or would prefer to do. As Ms. Cruz said, Mrs. Cruz, the risk limiting audit, Philip Stark, the inventor of the process, has said that it does not work on ballot marking device systems. It's not a legitimate way to audit. So this gives us another option and flexibility without imposing on anything else in the bill.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. I'd like to ask a question of the author of Mr. Blake. Thank you, Mr. Favorito. Mr. Blake, could you help us understand tabulation one more time? Does tabulation mean hand count ballots?
So the tabulation, as was the intent here, was essentially some states say we're gonna pick 2% of the ballots that were cast in an election, and we're just going to, or 2% of the precincts, and we're only going to count those precincts' ballots.
So they pick 2% of the precincts and hand count those ballots, is that correct?
And hand count those ballots. One thing I want to clarify is the process of counting the ballots is the same in a risk limiting audit or a tabulation audit. You are hand counting the ballots in either audit. So the intent of striking through tabulation or is to take away the option that's less valuable and to keep in the option that is more valuable in risk limiting audits, because in a closer contest, you're counting more ballots using a risk limiting audit. And to your point,
contest. So in a contest determined by 1% or less, or 2%, you would count more ballots in a risk limiting audit?
that is correct. And I'll go back to the 2020 general election, where we ended up counting all ballots in the contest because it was a narrow margin, and we conducted a risk limiting audit. And because of the closeness of the margin, we counted all ballots.
So when you discovered that the risk limiting audit indicated that the contest was extremely close, you then chose to fully tabulate all ballots. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Harbin?
Yes,
Senator Harbin?
for uniformity, and I'm not sure I think having an or there allows you either way. On page 6, and if you go up to option F, it says nothing in the code selected shall prevent an election superintendent from conducting a tabulation or a risk limiting audit. So we see there's not uniformity, I'm saying, of what I see, at least here, because on page 6, it's included. On page 4, we're striking it. And I'm just trying to figure out why would we do that? Because it's an or, so
Sure.
how does it hurt us?
The reason behind it is we want to require risk limiting audits in the law, because risk limiting audits are generally considered in the field more valuable than tabulation audits. So we want to put the requirement in the law to force that in for these elections, you have to do a risk limiting audit.
For these these statewide elections, is that right?
That's correct.
So top of ballot plus.
Yes.
So Senator Harbin, the way I read this is we're going to require top of ballot and then one other statewide race to receive a risk limiting audit statewide in every county.
Which could, if the margins are extremely close, it could result in a full recount
Correct.
of every ballot based upon the risk limiting audit. What
Right.
it tells us.
And in addition to those 2 required races that are getting risk limiting audits, that's where line 120, F applies. In addition to those 2 races, nothing prohibits an election superintendent from conducting tabulation or risk limiting audits in additional contests.
I was just, like I said, having uniformity, I was trying to figure out why. And
Right.
that was my question as far as that, because both of them are ways in counting.
That's right.
That are there.
And great question, and we've had a lot of internal discussion on this topic.
I guess my question would be, how does it negatively affect the bill if you leave both? It's kind of like having an option. My question.
I think it leaves the door open to do a less rigorous audit.
That's right. So for example, the Heritage Foundation, on their election integrity scorecard, one of their questions is, does your state law require risk limiting audits? And so this would force, in these circumstances, this would force in these circumstances to conduct a risk limiting audit for these elections.
Sir Dixon.
And so on lines, was it 120, 121, so the tabulation audits would still be allowed for local races? Is that what?
Any race.
For additional races, in addition to the 2 required to be audited.
Okay.
So a local superintendent could decide to do more, and I understand there's some in our state that do this already. They're doing more races, auditing all the races on their ballots.
There are, my understanding, I believe you're correct, Mr. Chairman, I believe there are certain election superintendents in certain jurisdictions that are doing effectively a verification audit on every race, every election. Is it not true that this bill would allow them to do a tabulation audit on top of ballot and the selected race?
They could.
They could?
Absolutely.
So that if they felt it was appropriate and they chose to?
That's right. And my intent with the bill is to become more rigorous with our scrubbing of the election and making sure that it's accurate. So this is to go further than we are required to go today.
One more question, Mr.
One more, certainly.
Just clarifying, so you could do the top of ballot, the way this bill's written, even striking tabulation, you'd have to do the risk limiting, but you could do the tabulation on top of it statewide?
That's the way I read it.
It would, every local jurisdiction would have to decide to do that.
Correct.
So the local jurisdiction could decide whether they wish to do a tabulation for a recount.
But I think the advantage of striking the tabulation or is to ensure that every county is consistently auditing those two races.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, if you look at Section 6, that is essentially a full recount of the entire ballot. And with deference to some of our testimony, I believe that reading the text portion of the BMD ballot or the marked sense portion of the absentee ballot provides great value because it is an independent addition to the tabulation that was done through our normal election system. Is that not true?
That is correct. We've heard a lot of concerns about the QR code and the human eye not being able to detect, what it's to interpret it. And so this is an alternative to the QR code.
Absolutely.
And it should help to reconcile the outcome and improve voter confidence.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Evans. We've had an opportunity to hear the bill and to hear a public comment. Is there any further discussion for the committee? Hearing none, what is the will of the committee? I have a motion from Senator Williams, do pass by substitute. Second? Second, Senator Robertson. Any further discussion? There are no amendments. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of HB 974, I'm sorry, I have a comment from Senator Estabos. Senator? Have a comment?
Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me? Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure, I'm not sure we have a quorum.
I believe we do. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I see
Oh,
7.
you count.
Chair
Okay,
counts.
sorry about
Count
that.
chairs. Thank you. Quorum is confirmed. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of HB 974 LC 473066S indicate with the uplifted hand. I see 4. Those opposed, like sign. I see 2. Motion carries 4-2. That concludes the agenda. It's been a long evening. I'm grateful to Chairman LaHood and Mr. Blake and all those of you who stuck with us. This committee will reconvene in the morning at 8:30 a.m. and we will hear one bill, HB 976, the substitute that went out this morning. No further business. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.